Welcome, everyone. My name is Shirley, and I will be your moderator this evening. I am excited to welcome Phylip Curtis with Unitas Dental as our speaker tonight for our PPO analysis. He will be identifying which insurances to join, keep, or drop. Please note that CE is not available for tonight's webinar. And Phylip, welcome so much, and thank you for being with us tonight. I will pass it over to you now.
Awesome. Thanks, Shirley. I'm super excited to go over this information today. I know we'll probably have even more practices join throughout, so I'll try to kind of keep looping it back in, but I appreciate it. So let's dive into the PPO analysis topic tonight. Appreciate everybody for joining us. I know you're probably joining in from all across the country, so go ahead and get comfortable with either the chat or Q&A box down below. If you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to send those in throughout, and we'll get to the Q&A at the end of today's presentation. Also, just for a fun little thing to know, use the chat box or the Q&A box down below to indicate where you guys are calling in from. I'm currently in Arizona. It is like 98 degrees today. So if you have better weather than me, then I'm extremely jealous because it's gross and hot here in Arizona. And I'm sure most of you are in a better scenario than I am because we're in the middle of the hot desert. So let me know where you're calling in from, what states you're representing, and we'll get started here today. So what we're going to jump into today is what we call our PPO analysis, how to identify PPOs to join, keep, or drop. Now, that's usually a really hot button topic for practices because a lot of times PPO is going to be a source of a lot of your frustrations. So if you're on the call today, you may be a brand new practice looking at which PPOs you think you want to join for the first time. Maybe you're an established practice or you have multiple locations, or maybe you're a DSO and you're just constantly evaluating this question, which is, I'm not sure if we want to join more, or maybe we want to, I don't know if we want to keep the ones we have, or maybe we know we want to drop some of these specific ones. This is always on the minds of somebody at the dental practice, a lot of times on everybody's mind at the dental practice. So we're going to talk about that today and kind of some strategies that you can use to help evaluate this equation for you. But as I go through this today, if you have any questions, please put those in the Q&A. I'll definitely get to those at the end. So let's dive right in. Again, like Shirley said, my name is Phylip Curtis. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Unitas PPO Solutions. Here is my email. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email anytime. That's Phylip with a Y and one L, unique spelling. So phylip@unitasdental.com. Just a quick intro into Unitas. We've been helping dental practices in the realm of PPO negotiations, PPO credentialing, and optimization and management. Since 2011, we've worked with thousands of practices in all 50 states. Right now, we represent over 1,500 dental practices nationwide. Like I said, we're located in sunny and extremely hot Mesa, Arizona, and there's over 100 PPO insurance experts on staff, and this is all we do, is to help negotiate, manage, optimize, and credential all the PPOs that your practice works with. Now, why you're on the presentation today is because, like I said, you're either a new practice or an existing practice who's wanting to evaluate which PPOs to join, keep, or drop. Now, for me and for us at Unitas, one of the things that we get questions on all the time from practices is, I'm not sure if I should keep the PPO that I'm with, or I'm not sure if I should join, I'm not sure if I should drop. Our answer is typically always the same. The most important variable in this equation is your reimbursement rate. Part of the reason why is because a lot of practices will start to ask this question because they may not have a lot of patients on that specific PPO. And so they'll say, I think I'm with too many PPOs. I don't know why I'm with this PPO. I don't have any patients coming in. And a PPO isn't really like a marketing channel. A PPO is essentially just a payment mechanism, right? It's a specific discounted payment mechanism. So in our perspective, reimbursement is key when you're thinking about which PPOs to join, keep, or drop, because having healthy PPO reimbursements can entirely mean the difference between having a profitable practice and a struggling practice. So if you're an existing practice, or if you're starting one from scratch, your problem is going to ultimately be the same. PPO reimbursements need to be high and healthy in order to remain profitable. And if they're low and they never increase, the margins that you get as a practice will shrink over time. If you're only getting paid the same rate for the same specific procedures year after year after year, and you're unable to raise those, but your costs are raising, like everybody in the United States, well, your profit margins are going to shrink. And so one of the most important factors I want everybody to consider is the popularity of a PPO in your given area is not the most important variable. It's the reimbursement, because a PPO with high reimbursements, but only a few patients, is still typically worth participating in. Because think about this scenario. Employer groups change their benefits every year. They may not change payers, but they reevaluate their benefits every year. So the school district or Walmart or Target or the police station, all these different places that are large employer groups that have different PPO, different coverages, they're evaluating those annually. And so maybe for the last 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, MetLife or Delta or Guardian or Cigna, maybe those are big players for you, but maybe Principal's not, or Emeritus is not, or Carrington is not, or a Cigna is not. Ultimately, what matters the most is how are they reimbursing you? So it's kind of short-sighted to look at it from the equation of, well, they may have a good fee schedule, but I'm not really getting paid on it. When in reality, those could switch literally overnight. If a payer or an employer in your area switches benefits, you want to keep in context what you're actually being reimbursed. Now, the PPO problem is pretty pervasive, and let's dive into kind of what that looks like. This is part of the reason why you're evaluating this. It's currently estimated that the insurance industry is collectively responsible for reducing dental practice profit margins by over $5 billion every year. Almost every dental practice in the country participates with insurance. Obviously, if you're on the call today, you likely participate with insurance or you're planning on doing it. And most dentists believe that they have to take whatever reimbursement rate the insurance company decides, and they feel powerless. That's the problem that most dentists are facing. In addition to that, insurance companies, they're meeting the requirements of the employer groups to reduce costs and limit exposure through implementing a bunch of different strategies that end up hurting your practice, reducing fee schedules, denying claims, reducing coverage, increasing waiting times, delaying payments. I know all these sound familiar to you, increasing their copays, increasing their deductibles, or adding plan exclusions. So again, who their main benefactor is the employer group, because that's the main purchaser of their plans. So they're trying to meet those requirements by a lot of times either reducing or keeping a fee schedule in the rate of reimbursement that you're getting paid, keeping it the same. So unless somebody comes to the table to change that, they likely will never change. And if they do, a lot of times they'll go lower. So they'll reduce the fee schedule. So if nobody's working on your behalf or taking action, then typically you're never going to get paid more for the procedures you're getting paid for now. So here's the facts. If you're like most practices, 70 to 80% of all of your revenue is coming from PPOs, mainly those reimbursement rates. And so low reimbursements mean that, especially if they never increase, that means that you're going to have low revenue that never increases unless you're just doing more dentistry. But if you've hit your cap for the amount of patients that you can treat and you hit your cap for treatment acceptance, really the biggest pendulum that you can swing here is how much you get paid per procedure per patient. There was a recent ADA poll done in September of last year. 57% of dentists have seen no increase in their reimbursements in the last 12 months. 25% have seen reimbursement decreases in the last 12 months, which you may be raising your hand saying, yeah, I was one of those dentists, or I've seen no increases. And then only 7% have seen an increase, and 11% don't even participate. So again, the vast majority of practices not only participate with insurance, but they've seen no increase or they've seen decreases. And so what we're here to say is positive change in the reimbursement area is only going to occur in your community as a dental provider if you take action to improve your reimbursements. If you're truly trying to evaluate, should I join, keep, or drop a PPO, what you're really trying to evaluate is this PPO going to allow me to remain profitable when I treat their patients in network? So how do you resolve that problem? That's what we're talking about today, is how to increase the reimbursement rates of the PPOs that either you're wanting to join or wanting to keep, so that way you can remain profitable. That is ultimately going to tell you whether or not you should join, keep, or drop, because one of the most important variables is the reimbursement rate. So what we'll talk about today is frameworks that you can follow to identify which PPOs you're with, what specific issues you're experiencing with them, how to identify and utilize our proven negotiation framework that you can implement on your own in your practice to negotiate your reimbursements. And then we'll talk about a calculation you can use when you're trying to forecast your PPO negotiation return on investment, because all of this comes back to the one single point. If you're on the call today, you're likely participating with PPOs or you're planning on it. And ultimately, you want to make sure that you're with the right ones. That's a pretty normal desire for every practice. But a lot of times, the only way to know that is if you're having competitive reimbursements. And what we're here to say is that you aren't powerless, and you shouldn't feel powerless, and you shouldn't feel like you have to accept just whatever is given to you. There's a lot of power in the equation of the dental provider and the PPO, and there's things that you can do to negotiate and increase your reimbursement rates. There's lots of different avenues that you can take, and that's what I'm here to discuss today, is how to identify those avenues and some strategies that you can actually implement in your specific practice without working with somebody like Unitas. So If you want to download the step-by-step breakdown of what we're going to go over today, the steps that you follow, the exact framework that we follow for our practices that you can implement on your own in your practice, we have a free guide. All you have to do is plug in your name and your email. You can download this. It's essentially an outline worksheet format of the slide deck that I'm going to go over today. So if halfway through this presentation, you're like, hold on, I'm trying to take all these notes. This is the way that you would download that. You just scan a QR code or go to ppguide.com. You can go download that guide. It's free and available to you to use. You can print out and implement this in your practice. My biggest pet peeve with webinars is when we give you all this information, but it's not actionable, or it's so much information you can't do anything about it. I just don't, my goal here isn't to overwhelm you and give you a bunch of information that you can't do anything with. So that's why we have this guide. You can go download that right now. It's a PDF, print it out right now if you want to and take notes, or send it to somebody on your team if you want them to implement this framework themselves. Feel free to do that. All right, that's my plug for that. Let's go ahead and dive into the framework for today, which is PPO negotiation and optimization. How can you improve your reimbursement rates if you're trying to evaluate a PPO to join, keep, or drop? Now, when you're negotiating and optimizing, there's really three things to do. Like I said, you need to identify which PPOs you're with or which ones you want to be with. You need to utilize our proven three-step PPO negotiation framework, and then figure out the calculation when you're forecasting your projected return on investment. So again, if you're trying to figure out, should I join, keep, or drop this PPO, and I'm going to negotiate, what's my potential ROI of increasing those reimbursements? What are the tactics to negotiate? And how do I even know which PPOs I'm with, or which ones I should consider? All right, let's dive in to key number one. Now, how to identify and map out your specific PPO participation is a little bit more rudimentary than you might expect, but it just takes a lot of work. First, you got to discover and map out your PPO participation. We'll talk about how to do that. You got to receive and document what your actual fee schedule reimbursements are. And then third, you got to compare and repair any UCR and reimbursement discrepancies. So that way you're making sure you're not shooting yourself in the foot prior to negotiating your reimbursements. Okay. All of this is the same exact framework that we follow for our clients. If you want to do this yourself, here's kind of the recipe for success that you can implement on your own in your practice. Now, if I'm wanting to know which PPOs I should join, keep, or drop, I probably should know the ones that I'm with right now, right? If I wanted to discover and map out my PPO participation as a practice, that's going to take quite a bit of phone calls and emails, but it is possible. We do it every day. It's more than possible. It just takes some time. What you need to know is, how do all of my doctors participate with each given insurance company? Are they in network or are they out of network? And a lot of practices think it stops there, but actually it doesn't. If you're in network, there's really three different layers of being in network with an insurance. And why this matters is because if you're trying to evaluate whether you should join, keep, or drop that insurance, or you're just trying to evaluate how to negotiate it, how you participate with that insurance is totally a different story than if you're just in network or out of network. And those three different types are direct contracting, which we'll go into in great detail. We'll talk about PPO to PPO leasing and how they borrow from each other. And then we'll talk about umbrella networking and how that works. But ultimately, how you get the answers to these questions is by making some phone calls. If you call provider relations, you can confirm your participation per doctor, per location. You just need to make sure that you're collecting it, writing it down, and asking the questions very clearly. Now, at the end of the webinar, I'll share with you a way that you can get an access to our contact list of provider relations numbers. So you don't want to have to go scour Google for all those phone numbers. If you watch to the end of today's presentation, I'll talk to you about how you can get your hands on our most up-to-date provider relations contact list, so you know exactly which phone numbers to call, not only for this, but for all of your PPO questions. Oh, hold on, throwing my pen today. And then also, you're going to want to use a spreadsheet to collect that info so you can focus on the major PPOs. But ultimately, what you're going to ask is, how is this specific doctor at this location participating with you? And they'll usually say, oh, well, Dr. Johnson's in network. Say, all right, great. Is he or she, are they directly contracted or are they being leased? And if they say, oh, they're being leased, you'd say, okay, well, how are they being leased? Are they in network through Guardian? Are they in network with you through Carrington? Are they in network with you through Dynamax? They should be able to give you that level of detail. The participation type, are they direct? Are they leasing? Are they under an umbrella? They should be able to give you the effective date. They should also be able to give you the copy of the fee schedule. Now, all of this is preparatory to increasing your reimbursement rates, but all of this is still part of the umbrella of, if I want to know which ones to join or keep or drop, I have to be able to utilize the power to negotiate in order to know if I should join, keep, or drop an insurance. Now, Participation types vary, and that's why I'm going to go into some detail. If this is new to you, then hopefully this is helpful. If it's not, this is still crucial information, because ultimately, if you don't exactly know how every doctor participates, you're kind of shooting in the dark. A direct contract with an insurance company sounds a lot like how you think insurance should work in general, because it's for a very common relationship. How it works is when you credential with an insurance company, and Dr. Johnson credentials at this location, he's now directly contracted with this orange insurance company according to that insurance company's fee schedule with those specific reimbursement rates. So when you treat patients for that insurance company, the claim comes back from them, paid according to that fee schedule in network. Now, how I've described that, you're probably saying, great job, Phil. That sounds exactly like how insurance works, which it is. Direct contracts are super common relationships, but they're not the only type of in-network participation. So how it evolves over time is there's PPO to PPO leasing arrangements. So you may have been directly contracted with somebody like Aetna for a number of years, but maybe you've been out of network with somebody like Guardian or Sun Life for a number of years. Well, somebody like Guardian or Sun Life, or any insurance for that matter, has the power to lease or borrow you from your existing direct contracts. How do they have that power? Because every time you credential with an insurance, in the terms of their agreement, it gives them the power to lease you out to other carriers. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. All it's doing is extending the relationship that you have out to other carriers. But it may be confusing because maybe you've been getting paid out of network for Guardian for 5 years, and now all of a sudden your claims are paid in network. Or maybe you didn't want to be in network with this particular insurance. What they can do is they can come to the orange insurance company, creating a leased partnership, pay a fee, they can essentially borrow that contract. So now what happens is the green insurance company, their patients start showing up at your practice. You send the claim out. Maybe you're expecting it to be out of network, or maybe you're expecting it to get paid a certain way. Now, all of a sudden, you're paid in network on a new fee schedule you've never seen. And why? It's because they've created this new leased partnership. Now, some of you may say, well, how is that legal? Or why would I want that to happen? Well, a lot of times that is a profitable way for you to participate with that insurance, or maybe it's a better way. Ultimately, that's not what we're talking about right now. What we're talking about is it's just a way to participate with insurance. And so if we're thinking about how can I increase my reimbursement rates, so that way I know if I should join this insurance or keep it or drop it, knowing that I'm being leased is just as important as an x-ray on a patient. If I know that the patient needs an extraction, probably not going to waste my time giving them the filling. Same thing here. If I know that I'm being leased, my strategies to negotiate will be way different than if I was just under a direct contract. And that's why finding this out matters a lot. Now, leasing between PPOs happens all the time. It may not be a bad thing for you. It's just a way that you participate. That third type of participation out there is what's called umbrella networking. So companies that are umbrella networks typically aren't considered an insurance company. They don't usually have card-carrying patients. A lot of people don't recognize their names unless they work within the dental industry. So somebody like Zealous or Maverist or Dynamax, Carrington or Connection or GEHA or GHA, those umbrella companies typically aren't considered an insurance company. What they are is essentially a middleman between multiple insurances. So if you've credentialed with a number or one or more of these umbrella networks, the way that that works is you agree to that umbrella's fee schedule. So you're signing a contract, you're credentialing, agreeing to reimbursement rates, then that umbrella company turns around and takes your information and passes it out to their network of PPOs. And if it falls into place, you may now fall in network with lots of insurances, like it shows here on this graph, under this umbrella. So if this is MetLife Cigna Guardian and this umbrella is Dynamax, what that would mean is you could send claims to MetLife Cigna Guardian. They're all going to pay you claims. But if you look at the EOB and you look at the reimbursement rate, what they're paying you on is Dentamax's fee schedule. Again, this isn't necessarily a bad way to participate. It's just a way to participate, which again, we'll get more into here in the strategy of how to use these to your advantage or if they're hurting you or helping you. But right now, the perspective that I'm taking is I just need to know that I'm in network with that umbrella before I'm negotiating, because like I said, your strategies will change if you're under an umbrella versus under a leasing arrangement versus under a direct contract. So hopefully that helps. And again, if you understand these, hopefully I'm not beating a dead horse, but it's arguably the most important thing for a dental practice to realize, which is how you participate with an insurance will tell you what you need to do in order to negotiate and optimize. PPO insurance is a web. It's a huge web of relationships that they've created amongst each other, and you're stuck in the middle of it. So you may not just be directly contracted with everybody. You're more than likely being leased, or you're falling under a couple of umbrellas. A lot of practices say, oh, I know we're direct. But I'd say if you're like 99% of practices, that's probably not the case, because these relationships can change without you totally noticing it or even being notified. And so it's important to go gather this information by phone, because the provider relations rep should be able to provide you this level of information. Now, what the kicker here is the participation varies by doctor. So that's another misconception here, is you may have one location, 3 doctors, and you credential them all on the same day, right? They could even be triplets, doesn't even matter, right? But because they're 3 separate individual providers, when they're credentialing, it's possible for their participation to be different. Either maybe it wasn't at the beginning, but then over time in each individual insurance system, it changed. So just because all doctors are credentialed at that location, just because they're all owners or they're triplets or they have the same last name, it doesn't matter what would make you think that it would be the same. It can be different. So when you're calling to verify participation, the biggest thing you want to avoid is making the assumption that if Dr. John is directly contracted, that Dr. Bob and Dr. Smith are also directly contracted. That's a huge assumption, and you don't want to make it, because a lot of times it's not the case. So when you're calling to verify participation, you have to verify it by doctor, by location. So then it gets even more complicated. Take this web and basically duplicate it 3 times. If there's 3 doctors at one location, then what if those same 3 doctors have a location, and that location is literally next door, just a different address, and they still have to be credentialed there? Can their participation be different? Absolutely, it can. And we see it all the time. The same doctor can work at 2 different addresses in the same building and be directly contracted here and under a leasing arrangement here. It's totally possible. Why? Because you have to think of these participation relationships as just individual records in an insurance company system. So the participation follows the doctor at the location with that PPO. So if I was a doctor and I work at 3 different locations that are on the same street, I can technically still be under different contracts. So what does that mean? I could get paid $85 if I treat the patient here. I could put the patient in my car, drive next door and get paid $95. I could take the patient, put in my car and get paid $105, just because my participation changes. And if I have different participation, then it's a different fee schedule, which means the reimbursement rates are different. So again, all of this matters, because if you're trying to evaluate whether you should join, keep, or drop, you have to try to negotiate and increase those reimbursement rates, so that way they can maintain competitive. The only way you can do that is if you truly know how you're participating. Because if I'm trying to negotiate with Aetna, but in reality, I'm not in network with Aetna directly, I'm in network with Aetna through connection, my strategies to negotiate the Aetna contract are totally going to be different. So hopefully I haven't beaten a dead horse there. Now, gathering your participation is key, but the second piece of the puzzle is knowing what the fee schedule is that's associated to how you participate. So at the same call, you typically can ask for the fee schedule that's associated to that participation. You can call them, you can check your portal. A lot of times you can email the provider relations rep to get a copy of your current fee schedules per doctor, per location. And then please make sure you once you have those, update them in your practice management software or your Dentrix to make sure that they're current. There's way too many practices out there that assume that their fee schedules are current, but if you're not doing this at least every year, odds are what you have in your system is out of date, and that's not even what they're planning on paying you. And you're putting that number on treatment plans, or you're calculating your production and collections off of the wrong number. So update your practice management software. The last thing you should do when you're gathering your when you're gathering your participation is fixing one of the number 1 problems that will prevent you from negotiating to begin with, which is if your UCRs, your office fees, what you charge for a procedure, and your reimbursement rates don't match up the correct way, you can shoot yourself in the foot and prevent a successful negotiation. Well, what do you mean by that? How often is there a scenario where a provider or a practice says my UCR for this procedure is $85, and they're getting all these reimbursement rates, but they have an insurance company that actually said they were going to pay $95? How often does that happen? All the time. And if that's happening, are you going to get $95 if you've submitted a UCR that says 85? Absolutely not, you won't, because a PPO wants to take a discount off of the UCR. And so it seems kind of simple, but again, one of the best tactics that you can do to check to make sure that this isn't happening in your practice is you can enter in all of those fee schedules you collected into a spreadsheet. And really, you just need to focus on like the top 35 procedures that you care the most about. But we're talking about a spreadsheet here where you plug in your main procedure CDT codes, about 30 of them in one column, a UCR column, and then all of the fee schedules that you're getting reimbursed. And then you're looking horizontal and saying, is there ever a situation where I've got a PPO that's willing to pay me more than what my UCR is? And if that's the case, I need to raise my UCR, because no UCR should be at or below a PPO fee schedule. So you can raise those arbitrarily, or you can utilize available percentile-based UCR analysis tools to ensure that your UCRs are not just above your PPOs, but that they're competitive for your area. That's another factor is, are you submitting competitive high reimbursement or high UCRs? That's going to correlate to having high reimbursements. If you're super cheap or super affordable for your area, then you're typically you're kind of setting the ceiling there for what your PPO reimbursements are going to be. So there's nothing wrong with being cheap or affordable, but you just want to see, how do I fall against my peers? And so that's an analysis we do for our clients. I know that's analysis Henry Schein does for their clients, is it says, where do your UCRs fall in comparison to your peers in terms of percentiles? So you can see, are you on the competitive side in terms of higher prices, or are you on the lower side? Like I said, high UCRs correlate to high reimbursements. If you're trying to ensure that you get paid on high reimbursement, having high and healthy UCRs can help you do that. I already talked about this earlier, but if you've joined since we've talked about it, I'm going to go over a lot of different frameworks today to negotiate and improve your reimbursement rates. If you're on the call today, you're wanting to know if you should join, keep, or drop a PPO. The best way to know that is, am I getting paid a competitive reimbursement from that insurance company, whether if I'm about to join them or if I'm already with them. The framework I'm going over today is the framework that we carry out for our clients, and I'm opening up the guidebook for you guys. If you want to implement this on your own in your practice, this is the step-by-step framework. You go to ppguide.com and you can download that right now. It's a free PDF, essentially an outline of what we're going to go over today. There's a QR code if you want to scan it. But if you haven't done that yet, feel free to do so. All right, step number 2. I know I'm moving fast, but we've got a ton of information to go over today. Number 2 is, how do you utilize our proven 3-step PPO negotiation framework to boost your success? Now, the 3 steps are essentially this. Number 1, ensuring that you don't waste time on the wrong procedures. Sounds pretty self-explanatory, but we'll talk about what that means. Number 2 is approaching the PPO negotiation process. So what do you say? Who do you talk to? What should you not say? The third one is, if you get an offer back from an insurance company, how do you compare that offer that you've received? How do you know if it's competitive? How do you know which math formulas to do, right? All those different things that we do for our clients. We'll talk about what the 3-step framework looks like. All right, how do you make sure that you're not wasting time on the wrong procedures? Nobody likes to waste time. How do you make sure that doesn't happen for you? Well, what you can do is you can export an annual production summary. That can come from your practice management software. Almost every practice management software in the country has one of these reports. An annual production summary essentially is a report that lists out procedure code, quantity of times performed, and the production generated. So it's literally 3 columns, and it says CDT code. You did it, 4,000 times, 2,000 times, 400 times, and then what's the production that was generated from that? And then you can take that in a PDF or a CSV, but you want to plug it back into a spreadsheet so you can sort it by highest grossing production. So you can see, what are the 20 to 35 procedure codes that generate the most production for our practice. Why do you want to know that? Because in step 1, like I was saying earlier, when you're starting to compare your UCR fee schedules, you don't want to plug in all 600 codes, because a lot of times you don't even do those. What we found is that 35 is kind of the magic number. That usually accounts for about 95% of all the production you do comes down to 35 CDT codes. So that's kind of the magic number there. But in step 2, what I'm going to get into next, in this next part of step 2, when you're comparing PPO fee schedule offers, you want to make sure you're comparing the procedure codes that you actually do and not getting distracted by the ones that you don't, and that you're keeping in mind how often you're doing those codes on an annual basis. All right, so approaching the PPO negotiation process, here are our tips and strategies for you. Number 1, keep in mind that most PPOs will consider negotiating every 2 to 3 years. And again, that's most. So there's some carriers out there that do it more frequently, some that are more responsive, some that rarely ever do it, but most insurances will consider negotiating with you about every 2 to 3 years. Doesn't mean that they will, just means that they'll consider it and they'll open up the door. When you reach out, where we recommend starting is somebody like provider relations. If you have a specific point of contact at the insurance company, start there. But what you want to do is you want to request a fee schedule increase. That's kind of the code word, or that's the phrase that we found to be the most effective. Reaching out to provider relations and saying, we'd like to request a fee schedule increase, typically gets the best response. Third is pay attention to your PPO participation that you collected in the first step and any leasing arrangements, and make sure that you're asking for increases on the fee schedules that are actually being used. So what does that mean? So if you're in network with Guardian, but you find out that you're actually in network with them through Aetna's fee schedule, and you want to increase what you're getting paid from Guardian, who you actually need to negotiate with is Aetna in this equation, not Guardian yet. First, you want to negotiate with Aetna. So again, I'll say that again. If when you're gathering participation, you find out that for Guardian patients, you're actually being leased through Aetna, that's the carrier you want to negotiate with, because that's the fee schedule that will increase. Now, we'll talk about later on what to do with Guardian and when to approach them, but the order and who you approach first matters, because if you accidentally approach this one first, you may end up changing your participation without you knowing, decreasing your fee schedule, falling out of network. The order and how you approach these definitely matters. So you want to approach the person whose fee schedule is being utilized when the claim is paid. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. If you get an offer back from an insurance company, how do you compare it? How do you know what to look at? How do you know if it's competitive? What do I look at the whole fee schedule? Do I look at part of the fee schedule? These are all questions that are going to come up, right? A lot of you are thinking, will they even come back with an offer? And I'll say, yes, they come back with offers all the time. But then once they do, you want to evaluate it, make sure that you're looking at the right things, because you don't want to get too excited or too underwhelmed. And so using the previous steps that we outlined, identify those 20 to 35 procedures that have the highest production for you. And then in a spreadsheet, again, you can plug in, again, your main procedure codes, your UCR, what they're paying you right now on your current fee schedule, and then what they're offering to pay you on this new offer. One of the things you also want to look at is how frequently are you performing that procedure code. Pay attention to that annual frequency, because each procedure can differ. Some fee schedules may increase the whole fee schedule. Some of them may decrease. Some of them may just do a one-off increases and decreases. If you're going and you're getting an offer back from an insurance company, $100 procedure increase could be outweighed by a $5 procedure decrease, depending on how often you do that. So maybe you say, oh, look, our crown went up by $100. Awesome. But if your pro fee went down by $5, depending on how many crowns versus pro fees you do, you might end up actually losing money if you don't do the math correctly, right? And that's a strategy that an insurance company could use if you're not paying attention. So again, pay attention to your annual frequency, so that way the math ends up making sense for you. And then again, evaluating that fee schedule, my other tip for you is to figure out how does that compare against all the other PPOs that you're working with. If that's in the top 25% of your fee schedules compared to the other PPOs, that's probably a pretty decent offer. But when you accept it, and again, knowing that that's your responsibility to say, all right, I'm going to take this new offer, you want to make sure that you're auditing your EOBs after accepting the new fee schedule increase to ensure that you're actually being paid on what you just accepted, right? Most fee schedule increases can take anywhere from 30 to 90 days to go into effect. And too often do we have practices that come to us that they negotiated a year ago, 2 years ago, then they eventually check their EOBs and they actually never got paid on the higher fee schedule, or it just changed over time. So make sure that you're regularly auditing your EOBs, make sure that it actually worked. And the way that you do that is to check to make sure that what you were paid matches the fee schedule that they negotiated. All right, number 3. What's a simple calculation you can use when you're forecasting your PPO negotiation return on investment? Number 1, how are you going to ensure that those PPO fee schedules are competitive? Number 2, how are you going to minimize optimization? How do you even, let's talk about what optimization even is. How do you minimize those risks and those benefits? And then how do you calculate your return on investment from PPO negotiations? We'll dive into those 3 steps now. All right, so if you want to ensure that your PPO offers are competitive for your area, you have to keep in mind what that means. Number 1, you don't want to get locked into a low fee schedule. Most fee schedules you're going to be locked into for a minimum of 2 years. When I say locked in, that doesn't mean you can never drop the PPO. It just means that they're typically not going to renegotiate with you after you've accepted that offer. So if you just credentialed, you got a network 3 months ago, probably won't negotiate with you for at least 2 years. And so if you're on your own negotiating, keep in mind that when you say yes to an offer, you likely won't be able to reopen the door to negotiate for 2 whole years. What Unitas has is we have the data to compare your offers to determine how competitive they are for your area. Because we've worked with thousands of practices over the last decade, we have an enormous database of fee schedules. We know what a good reimbursement rate looks like. What we never do is we never say, okay, Dr. Johnson gets paid X, right? Here's yours. Isn't that frustrating? Dr. Johnson gets paid more than you. That's not something we'll ever do. We create and sign confidentiality agreements with you, with our clients, with the insurances. So we're never taking fee schedules and bringing that to you saying, hey, look how much better we could get you. What we do though, is we have this database. So we understand what is a competitive fee schedule. The other thing is the insurance companies know that we have access to this data as well. And so when we're negotiating, we understand what a competitive offer looks like when it comes back. How does that compare against what we've seen? Should we continue going back for more? The PPOs also know that we have access to that. So a lot of times we can kind of cut through the junk or those junky offers because they understand that we're not going to take something that's super low when we understand what's being paid in the area, if that makes sense. We also have high level dedicated insurance company contacts that a lot of practices don't have access to. Doing this for a decade means that we've established professional working relationships with a lot of insurance carriers, not only because we're there to negotiate, but because we credential hundreds of providers every month. We submit anywhere from 500 to 600 applications out the door every month. We're one of the largest credentialers in the country. And so when we come to the negotiation table, we bring value to the provider and to the PPO, which is what allows us to negotiate with a lot of these carriers. Most practices don't have that kind of leverage to not only have the information of what's being paid, but they also don't have a carrot to bring to the table to provide to the PPO besides their own participation. So not only do we have that, but our team can negotiate on your behalf with these insurances, and we've negotiated on behalf of thousands nationwide. We've got a highly trained team. We've got years of experience. And so if you want to ensure that your PPO offers are competitive for your area, you have to use somebody like Unitas that has information and access to what other providers are being paid and the point of contacts to know who to reach out to and the ability to marry those two to represent you professionally to the PPO. So that's how you would ensure that those offers are competitive. Now, another strategy when you're evaluating whether or not to join, keep, or drop an insurance company is the ability to switch how you're participating. Like we talked about earlier, you can be direct, you can be leased through an insurance, or you can fall under an umbrella. With almost every insurance company out there, there's typically 5 to 6 to 10 different ways you can participate in the marketplace. So Guardian's a prime example of this. You can participate with Guardian through 5 or 6 different carriers. You can do the same with Aetna. You can do a lot with Cigna. You can do a lot with Principal. There's a lot of different ways you can participate. And so optimization is typically the next strategy for us when we're working with clients to say, well, based on how you're currently participating, we can identify other arrangements that exist out there, other leasing relationships that have been established with that insurance company that may be more profitable than the one that you're on right now. What that means is multiple PPOs have multiple paths to participation. We've helped thousands of practices to optimize their participation, which leads to higher reimbursements. So we understand not only how to shift participation, but we understand the risks that are involved in shifting participation and the timeline. A lot of times practices don't necessarily know how to switch from being in a direct contract to being under a leasing scenario or vice versa. If I'm being leased, but I want to be direct because that's a higher fee schedule, how do I make that work? Well, it depends on the insurance. A to B, B to C, C to D, depends on all of those equations, depends on your state, depends on the time of year. There's a lot of variables that go into shifting that, but optimization can be one of the most profitable strategies and highest ROI strategies when you're trying to increase your fee schedule. But it's typically not something that I would recommend a practice does on their own because you have to have done this at scale for so many practices, so many different states to understand what the risks are. Because optimization can be one of the most risky strategies. It has a lot of times the highest reward, but if you do it incorrectly, or even if it just happens, you can fall out of network for a period of time when you were just trying to switch how you got paid. So if you'd send in the wrong paperwork to the wrong carrier at the wrong time, not in the right order, you can fall out of network, which that's not what you want. Or you could just switch to a different fee schedule and it's lower than the one that you're originally on. So not only do you not want it to stop being paid, but you also don't want it to get worse. So again, optimization has a huge benefit, but you have to understand all the different players and pieces to the equation. And that's what Unitas brings to the table because this is all we do. We play this optimization game day in and day out for over a decade. All right. Optimization opportunities, like I was saying, those exist all over the place. But when you're being leased, just because you're being leased, and let's say this is Guardian and this is Aetna, just because you're being leased through Aetna doesn't mean that's the only way you can participate with Guardian, right? And just because you're being networked through an umbrella or just because you're under a direct contract doesn't mean that's the only way that you should participate or could participate. Sometimes there's more profitable ways to participate. And that's what we help practices look through when we're optimizing. Now, when you're trying to figure out the third step here, which is to calculate your return on investment. So if you're trying to negotiate and increase your reimbursement rates, and you want to know what the ROI is for that, if you're going to do it on your own staff's time and your own work, I don't know what the ROI would be for your own staff because you guys haven't done it before, right? When we do it, we have our own results and our own calculations. So for over 10 years, like I said, we've implemented this. So we track all of our results. We can give you what our ROI projection would be, because if our staff does it and we do it with our systems, then we understand what a typical average client would look like. But just so you can understand what the potential is for a practice to do this in any scenario, here's a projected PPO revenue increase for our typical client. Our typical client does typically over $1 million a year in production. Usually at least half of that production comes from PPOs that we can end up increasing through negotiating or optimizing. So if you say of every million, typically about $500,000 is negotiable or can be optimized. For us, our average increase when we negotiate or optimize a fee schedule on average is about 10%. Our above average clients see around 18%, below average are around 4%. So calculating that to an ROI, it's easily over a $50,000 projected revenue increase. That's doing the same amount of production. You're just getting paid more for the procedures you're already doing. So for our clients, that's a substantial ROI based off of what they'll pay us in terms of a service fee. But if you're doing it yourself, I don't know how effective you're going to be. I don't know who you're going to reach out to. I don't know if you're going to be able to evaluate those offers. So if you're working with somebody like Unitas, that's how you can get a projected ROI if you're trying to figure out if this is worth your time or not. Now, here's some results for clients that we've worked with recently. Dr. Morgan in North Carolina, a $64,000 projected return after 5 PPOs were negotiated and 2 optimizations. Dr. Baker in Texas was 5 PPOs, 3 networks, $79,000. Dr. Young, over $100,000 in projected revenue increase from 7 insurances and 4 PPO optimizations. So again, these are some client results, but ultimately when we're talking to a practice, it depends on what your scenario is. What we're trying to keep everybody to understand today is that no change will happen unless providers take action. We love to work with practices everywhere. We love to work with everybody, but not everybody wants to work with us and not everybody can. And we can't work with everybody, honestly, because we don't have that level of capacity. So these strategies that we talked about today, if you're trying to figure out if you want to join, keep, or drop an insurance, the most important variable to us is reimbursement, and it probably is to you as well. So how you negotiate those reimbursement rates comes back to these 3 key strategies. Number 1, you got to understand which PPOs you participate with and what your current reimbursements are. The way that you do that is you discover and document your participation status by calling each insurance company and collecting your fee schedules. The next thing is you got to tactfully approach the negotiation process. Make sure you're not wasting time on the wrong procedures, that you're talking to the right person and phrasing it correctly. And lastly, if you're going to consider this in total, think about how can I maximize these opportunities? So you can partner with PPO experts like Unitas to evaluate not only additional opportunities like optimization, but to do the negotiations for you, to use our leverage and our expertise and the information that we have to get high competitive offers. So it's 3:44 for us. It's been 45 minutes. Me just berating everybody with information, but hopefully it's been super helpful because we're going to get to Q&A, and I've seen quite a few come in. So if you've had questions throughout that, I definitely am here as long as you guys need to answer these questions, but I'm sure everybody's feeling like information overload. So what I'm going to do before we hop into the Q&A is I definitely want to make everybody a special offer, if that's okay. For everybody that's been on the call today, I'm super excited to go over all this stuff with you, but I know that this is information overload. And so just final reminder, if you haven't yet, go download the PPO guide. It's absolutely free. Scan the QR code, download that PDF so you can implement this in your practice. But what's likely going to happen after the webinar today is you're either going to go back to treating patients, or maybe you're done for the day. You're going to go home and then you wake up tomorrow and you're going to go back to treating patients and scheduling appointments. Everybody's super busy. And the whole reason why we have a business not only is because we can do this, but it's because practices don't have time to do this. They don't have the expertise to do this. They can't do this in-house. And so if your practice needs higher reimbursements and you need those now, if it's okay with everybody, I want to make everybody a special offer that will help you implement this way faster than just trying to download the PDF on your own. If you go schedule a free PPO consultation with our team, all you got to do is go to this special link. And if you do, you'll get these 3 bonuses, which are going to be super valuable, but you have to go through this special link or else you're not guaranteed to get them. If you go to ppoguide.com/go, or if you're like me and you hate typing URLs into your iPhone, just scan the QR code. We'll take you straight to this consultation page. You can book a free 30-minute consultation, and it's just that. It's a consultation with our service experts. They'll review your specific PPOs. If you've negotiated in the past, what state you're in, are you a new practice, are you an existing practice? They'll help calculate your potential ROI if we feel like you're a good fit for us. They'll talk about which service you're best suited for. We turn away close to 30% of the consultations we talk to because we're not a great fit for them. But that's like what I'm saying. It's a consultation. We're there to help you evaluate. Maybe this is something you should do on your own, or maybe you should, or we should help you do it. So if you go schedule that call and complete it with our team, you get all of these awesome limited time bonuses, all 3 of them. Number 1, it's probably the one you've been waiting for, which is if you don't want to sit on phone for hours because you've called the wrong phone number, we have our PPO Provider Relations Master Contact List available to you, easily $199 value if we were to just sell it to you, but we'll give it to you absolutely free. Like I said, obviously we make hundreds of phone calls, if not thousands of phone calls to PPOs every month. So if you want our master contact list, you want to save yourself hours of time sitting on hold, if you want to collect your own PPO participation way faster, then you can print this out and keep it handy. And all the other questions you have, these can set you in the right direction to calling the correct number for the correct carriers. I'm not just talking national, I'm talking all the Deltas, all the Blue Crosses, all the national carriers. We've got it there in that sheet for you. Huge value. All you got to do is schedule and complete that consultation. Number 2 is our e-guide of our 35 most common insurance problems and how to avoid them. So after a decade, we've compiled our top PPO solutions to the most commonly asked questions. Because we work within the realm of PPOs and we negotiate and credential, we get a lot of insurance questions that we don't know the answers to, or we can't help with. But instead of just saying, sorry, I don't know what to do, what we'll do is we'll go find the answer, create it into a document and give it to you so you can point you in the right direction. We have a lot of those, but these 35 are the most common. So ones like down coding, balance billing, out-of-network benefits, how do you change your tax ID number? How do you change your business name? What do you do when you want to credential a new associate? So if you want to save yourself hours of trying to figure out problems that thousands of practices before you have already had to encounter that we've had to figure out, easily a $299 value. You typically have to be a client of ours to get these. We've compiled the most popular ones, put them in this book. You can get that e-guide if you schedule and complete that consultation, but you got to schedule through this link. So go to ppoguide.com/go or scan that QR code. Here's the 3rd one. All throughout today's presentation, I've been talking about just create a spreadsheet. Just create a spreadsheet. Nobody likes creating spreadsheets. They're the worst. So what we've done is we've used the same tool that we use, the same exact template that I've built in our Google Sheets account, the same tool that we use to analyze our clients' UCRs and fee schedules. We've duplicated that in a Google Sheet format, and you can get a copy of it to use in your own practice. You can download it as Excel, you can use it in Google Sheets. But if you want to be able to plug in your procedures, your UCRs, and your PPO fee schedules and figure out, are my UCRs priced too low? How do my reimbursement rates compare to each other? So who is my highest paying PPO? What are my highest reimbursing insurances? If you want it to be easy to use and have automated formulas and the automated calculations built into it, here it is. We've already built it for you. So easily a $499 value. We literally don't even give this to clients. The only way you can get this is through this webinar and through this link. So if you want that tool, by all means, take a look, take a crack at it. And all you have to do is schedule and complete a consultation. All right. So let's recap real fast before we jump into Q&A. Everything that you're going to get here, you're getting, number 1, a free PPO evaluation and ROI projection consult with our team, and to see if we can work with you, which again, that's priceless. If we can work with you, then we can get you a great ROI. But then also you'll get the e-guide, 35 most common insurance problems, the PPO provider relations contact list, the PPO fee schedule analysis tool, easily hours of saved time and higher reimbursement rates if we work with you, easily a $997 value or more, absolutely free. All you got to do is schedule and complete a consult. So if you haven't done that already, feel free to do so. We'd love to chat with you, and we will send those bonuses out to you right after your call is complete. And we'd love to talk to you and help you out as best as we can. Now, we'd love to just jump into some FAQs before we open up for a Q&A section. Here's kind of like the most common questions that we're going to get on average. Then I'm happy to open up, because we've got about 10 minutes, open up just a free range Q&A for everybody. But if you have any questions that we don't get to today, I'm going to keep this up on the screen. That's our main inbox, and it's managed by our sales team. So if you send an email to pposolutions@unitasdental.com, they'll help answer your questions or schedule you for a call. Let's answer some of these FAQs. A lot of practices are going to automatically ask, are there any PPOs that won't negotiate? So who should I not waste my time on? A lot of times it just depends on the state, but really the main carrier that's historically really never negotiated that we've seen has really been Delta. Delta historically is unwilling to negotiate. Doesn't mean that they won't, but in the 10 years that we've done this, we've probably seen maybe 3 times over thousands of clients where they've come back with an increase. Pretty uncommon for Delta to negotiate. Most every other carrier either has done it in the past or is actively doing it. So we suggest trying it with almost every carrier. The next question is a lot of times people ask us, oh, can we work with Unitas? What do you charge? Well, obviously the answer to that is if you schedule the consultation, we'll talk to you about whether or not we think you're a fit, what service you're best fit for, and what the price is. We have different services based on the types of practices that you are, whether you're established, or if you're fee for service, or if you're brand new, if you're a good fit for us or not. So we have different services and pricing. We could talk about all that on the consultation. Would be happy to do that. Some practices say, we're thinking about dropping PPOs. Is that something you can help with? Again, if you're thinking about dropping, that's probably why you're on the call today. What we typically recommend for practices is if you're thinking about dropping a PPO, it's probably either because it's not super popular or because you're not happy with the reimbursement rates. We've already talked about why we think that popularity and the busyness of a PPO is not really the most important variable, because again, that could change overnight. Just because you don't have a lot of patients there doesn't mean that you should drop the PPO. If it has a high reimbursement, what if the employer group changes next year to that fee schedule and you've dropped them? Now you're out of network and you're scrambling to get back in network. You think you're going to get that same great fee schedule again? Probably not, right? So one of the things that we help our clients do is we go through this process of analyzing the PPOs that you're with, negotiating where we can, coming up with optimization recommendations, and then putting those into place and trying to increase the fee schedules. Typically, by the time we've laid out all of our optimization recommendations and we know which PPOs we think you should join, keep, or drop, at that point, then we can help you evaluate, should you drop PPOs, because we know what the best offers are on the table. So we can help you evaluate that once we've exhausted all those options to know what's the best paying fee schedule. Because a lot of times we'll get on a consult with somebody, they'll say, I'm ready to drop XYZ PPO. I'm just tired of these reimbursement rates. And then 2, 3, or 4 months down the road, after you're negotiating, they may end up being one of your best fee schedules. So we don't want to be short-sighted and drop a PPO if it can end up being a high reimbursement plan for you. Another common question is, I'm opening or purchasing a new practice. How do I set up my PPO contracts? Do I need to get credentialed if I'm already in network at another location? And the answer is absolutely. If you're setting up a new practice, you always have to credential at that location. And that's one of the things that we help practices with, is establish their PPO participation from the beginning. But the biggest piece of leverage you have is before you credential at an insurance company at this new location, you have all the leverage. You haven't joined the insurance yet. And so when we're working with a practice, we have a specialized service for new builds or transitions where we help negotiate offers with the insurance before you credential, while there's still a lot more leverage on the table. Doesn't mean there isn't leverage afterwards. It's just typically once you've credentialed, they've got you, and they typically won't negotiate for at least 2 years. And so if you're opening a new practice, or you're thinking about opening a new practice, or you're thinking about buying a practice, or you've bought a practice, we can talk to you about that on the consultation. There's some strategic advantages to that specific scenario that we can help when we're negotiating. Okay. Last one is, I'm adding an associate and I want them to treat insured patients. Do they need to be credentialed, or can they just bill under me? This is always a common billing question. And the answer is, you want to do what's legal and compliant, which the best answer is you need to bill under the treating provider. Just because they're not a network doesn't mean you shouldn't bill under them. And the claims might get paid out of network until you're credentialed, but ultimately you should bill as legal as possible, which is under the treating provider. Now, those are our FAQs. I'm happy to jump into some Q&A. Shirley's here, and let's dive into those. We got about 4 or 5 minutes left.
Thank you so much, Philip, and thank you so much, Unitas, for a really interesting presentation. And now we are open for questions. And please go ahead and enter your questions in the Q&A box. And we have a few in there, as you noted before, Philip. And let me just start reading them. This one is from Dr. Helen Hong. Did you say a typical healthy PPO dental practice has about 70 to 80% revenue from insurances?
No, I'd say it's a typical average practice. Now, I wouldn't categorize that as healthy, right? It's the typical practice has 70 to 80% of their patients coming in through PPO insurance because that's just the average for the country right now. There's plenty of successful practices that are 10% PPO and plenty of horrible practices that are 10% PPO. At the end of the day, it just depends on what your reimbursement rates are and if those are competitive for your area. But if you're like average practices, that's probably where your mix is. I wouldn't say that you needed to try to force a patient base to say, okay, I have too many PPO patients, I need more cash, or I have too many cash, I need more PPO. Ultimately, what matters is, are you mixed well for your demographic for your area? Maybe you're in an area where not very many people have insurance. Maybe you're in an area where everybody has insurance, but the average practice is going to be about 70 to 80%. Because according to the National Association of Dental Plans, I think the last report that they came out with was somewhere around 78% of employed American adults have some form of PPO dental insurance. So assuming that that's the country's average, it's probably going to be a typical average for your practice.
Thanks, Philip. And here's a comment with a question, which you've kind of answered, but just to sort of reiterate the point. This is from Dr. Wasef. I don't want to do this and may have to run and see a patient and may not finish the seminar. How can we hire you? And how can we get that information? I don't want my staff to spend time on this, would rather hire you guys.
What a great question. I love that question, but it's everybody's thought, right? Which is nobody wants to do this because again, it takes a long time, it takes a lot of work, which is a totally normal assessment. So for sure, go schedule that consultation with us. If those of you haven't done it yet, I'm going to put that link back here on the page. Leave it here. Go to ppoguide.com/go, schedule that consultation. We'll talk to you about how we can work with you. Again, we may not be able to work with you, but at least we can help you understand what your options are. But if you're like 70 to 80% of practices nationwide, we can definitely help you. So schedule through ppoguide.com/go.
Terrific. And this next question is from Dr. Laws. What if we write off unpaid hygiene procedures as complimentary? Do we still need to take those top procedures into account?
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, that's what you're typically generating is those hygiene codes, preventative and restorative. So what you're doing regularly is what you need to evaluate because you're gonna, even if you're writing off, again, it comes down to what your definition of a write-off is. But even if there's a difference between what you're producing and what you're collecting, a lot of times hygiene codes still are reimbursable and you're still being reimbursed for those. So those reimbursement rates matter. And I would keep those into account when you're negotiating with the insurance company. And the last one is one that we just answered, which is, does Delta Dental negotiate? So hopefully I've answered that one, which is, it's pretty uncommon for them to negotiate. I'll never say never. It's pretty uncommon. Delta Dental has different entities per state. One of the things that we help our clients do is evaluate whether or not they're with Delta Premier, Delta PPO. A lot of times, depending on your state, you may be able to submit what's called a fee filing form, where you're submitting an updated copy of your UCRs. Sometimes that can trigger your Delta Premier fee schedule to increase. So again, we don't consider that a negotiation because nobody talked to you and nobody went back and forth, but ultimately you're not dead in the water in every state for Delta. Sometimes there's things you can do.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Philip, and thank you so much, Unitas, for a wonderful presentation this evening. And thank you all for joining us this evening. We did record tonight's webinar and we'll email the recording out sometime next week. And we'd appreciate your feedback via the survey that will pop up on your screen shortly. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars.